We are so grateful tonight to have Carmen Marriott, who is here tonight. She is a former American Pilgrims board member as of, 3 weeks ago, I think, Carmen. So, so we are really thankful to have her here tonight, and she is going to talk. And I'm also going to share a screen PowerPoint as well. So while she talks, we will let her go ahead and get started. Go ahead, Carmen.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. I can't imagine what else I'd be doing except talking to my pilgrim friends on a Thursday night. During COVID, I've learned how to use Zoom and connect with other people. I see some of you that are part of my regular circle. Martha Kreitz and Paula, our new board member, Ron Shields used to work with us, Sarah Pierce Martin. Great to see everybody. Great to see everybody. So, you know, it's kind of a rare case when we meet another pilgrim who doesn't want to talk about his or her pilgrimage, isn't it? It's our kind of our favorite thing that we like to do when we meet up. We like to talk about our journey, perhaps in terms of our favorite albergue, a special meal that we had someplace, maybe your favorite hospitalero, a church or a museum or someplace that you went. And we want to share our stories with everybody. If we're lucky, we get to talk about the spirit of the Camino too. You know, what brought us there, what we've learned when we came back, how we live when we get back. But we're not going to talk about that stuff tonight because we only have an hour, and that's stuff that we do while we're on the Camino and when we're with other pilgrims. One of my other favorite things to talk about is about American Pilgrims as an organization. I've been a member for 8 years. You all are members, and there's a lot to talk about. But I'm not going to talk about membership or any of that stuff tonight either. What I do want to talk about is the spirit of the Camino. Whether you've walked it, whether you're thinking about walking it, whether you're seeking a way to continue to have that spirit in your heart, whether you've been called to walk now, maybe you're planning your first step. That's what I want to talk about. You know, any kind of pilgrimage or walking experience requires some preparation. It's not about, no, it is about the gear. It is about what route you're going to be taking. It's about the infrastructure issues that you're going to be facing. All of those are really important aspects of a Camino. And I'm not an expert. Hi, Jim. I'm not an expert. I'm not a George Greenya. I am not a scholar. I'm just a, you know, I'm a reformed lawyer, right? I'm a pilgrim. That's my life now. But I'm going to share tonight some recent developments and some interesting ideas that are kind of floating around in the international pilgrim organizational universe. Okay, I'm not going to share necessarily the one-on-one stories and things that people are talking about. You know, like, I want to do this Camino, and what about this and that? These are just kind of ideas and developments floating around, primarily in Spain, but some in France. Much of what I'm going to share with you tonight is based on personal friendships that I've forged with pilgrims and people that I've met through my role as the external relations representative for American Pilgrims. So I've gone to a couple of conferences over the past several years. The most recent one was in October, at the end of October in Spain. And, you know, COVID has affected everything in our lives. It's affecting how people are thinking about a pilgrim as a tourist. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, there's some of these ideas that they're talking about are just kind of maybe even out there. But for those of us that have been before, it's not going to be the same place. And for those of us that haven't been, it's going to be an experience that's based on COVID as one of the data points that we need to manage around. So let's see. Just a little bit about myself. I have walked several Caminos, and it doesn't really matter how many or where. I have been an hospitalera. twice in Spain and twice in France. And now what I've been doing is walking and serving and walking and serving. And for me, serving as an hospitalero, I'm going to be one of your trainers, has really provided me with an opportunity to live the spirit of the Camino. So just to close before we start, my Caminos have changed my life dramatically. You know, in addition to retiring and getting old and all that stuff that happens to all of us, you know, it just really changed my focus and allowed me to put the Camino into my daily life and in my heart. And you know, the 4 values that American Pilgrims has come up with based on all of our membership input are the 4 values of simplicity, community, service, and gratitude. And you know, it's a really nice way to live, and I attribute that to my pilgrimages. So I hope what you'll get out of this hour, and I hope it's not 100% talking head, but it will give you the opportunity to reflect on why you felt or you feel compelled to travel to Spain, and what you might do to prepare for your next Camino. And in addition to the right boots and the right poles and the cheap airfares and you know, whether you need to be vaccinated and all that stuff, but kind of get your head into the space of, you know, what's calling you to go. And for many of us, you know, my COVID answer was, if anybody said, do you want to do something? My answer was always yes. Yes, I want to do, because COVID has so confined us in so many ways that, so why are you saying yes to the Camino? You know, I would like you to end this hour thinking about that too. So, Allison, would you put up the spirit of the Camino slide? So this came up from the board of directors back. Martha, you might have been on the board when we did this. It's on your credential that you order from American Pilgrims. And it really is reflective. You know, live in the moment. Welcome each day, its pleasures and its challenges. Make others feel welcome. Share. Feel the spirit of those who have gone before you. Imagine those who will follow you, and appreciate those who walk with you today. And all of those, well, the bottom 2, you're not walking with people, but you know, that is the spirit of living every single day of your life, you know, living in the moment. I mean, we're talking about mindfulness and all that stuff. You know, welcome each day, its pleasures and its challenge. That's concept of gratitude. Make others feel welcome, you know, part of community building, sharing. I think it's just an awesome way to think about the spirit of the Camino. So next slide, Allison. So what's happening in Spain? These are the practical parts of what we're going to talk about this hour. Starting February 1st, there was an announcement today or yesterday that came out that says you're going to need to be able to show that you've had the vaccine, and a booster will be required within 14 to 70 days of 270 days of entry. That's 9 months. So that means if you got your second vaccine, first of all, you're not getting into Spain without a vaccine. Okay, there's no medical waivers. You are not getting into Spain, and France has the same thing without a vaccine. And now you're going to have to show proof of booster. And you can, Allison, I sent you a link to an article that has all the links in there. And if you want to put that in the chat room, you can share that. So nobody's surprised, I don't think. So this is an article by the Points guy, and in it, he's got the links to Spain and France and other countries that are adopting this requirement.
Carmen, I'm also going to put the information from the U.S. Embassy related to travel to Spain as well.
Okay, good. Do you think it's too early to put the survey questions up and I'll tell them what we're going to do here? Oh, no, wait, I don't want to do that yet. So yeah, that's you're not getting in without a booster. The second, what about the albergues? This is primarily from the federations in Spain, and there are various federations depending on what route you're going to be taking on the Camino. But the requirement is a national requirement with respect to the frequency of the cleaning. The 50% capacity requirements remain in effect. Not all of the albergues have opened. Not all of them will open. But speaking with my friends in Spain this week, who are working with this French Federation of Caminos, you will be able to have a place to stay if you decide to walk within walking distance. It may not be a donativo, it may not be a private, but there will be some place for you to be able to stay with doing any kind of a normal, not an ultra Camino, okay? You're not gonna have to walk 50 kilometers every day. The masking requirements are still in effect. The social distancing requirements are still in effect. What I was told is it depends on where you are and how much they follow the law. These are not guidances. This is the law. And every place is different, but there have been very few formal reports of COVID sharing. And when they do hear something, you know, the word gets out pretty quick among the pilgrim community and in the hospitalero community where you're going to be staying, that somebody has tested positive or something else. And they don't have the same privacy requirements that we have, I don't think. So that telephone thing keeps going through. So reservations, which were not taken before COVID at many of the albergues, are still strongly recommended. A, to find out if the place is open, and B, because of the capacity limitations. And the president of FIX, Juan Carlos Perez, said that he expects that that's going to be in effect, you know, for the rest of the year. So what are they seeing? Not very many people. Not very many people. And one of the biggest changes that he said on the Camino for 2021, where there were people walking, there were primarily Europeans, very few Koreans, which numbered the second or third most populous group of people walking the Camino before 2019 statistics. So you have a lot of people who cannot get in or, you know, have not been willing to go in at this point. So they're expecting, they're very optimistic that with the Holy Year this year, continuation, the first one in 11 years that has been continued by the Pope, that their numbers will be about 2019 numbers, which were not the highest that they've ever been, right? So how crowded is it going to be? It's anybody's guess. It's Martha, I'm looking at you. I don't know. No one knows. They're hoping, and they are doing a lot of things that in some respects sound to me a little off-putting, but on the other side, they're looking out for us as the pilgrims, okay? So one of that is the digital credential. And we've all heard about that was coming. It came in 2021. It's not, if any of you have used it, I'd love to see your comments in the chat room. When I went on the site and downloaded the app a couple days ago, it doesn't seem to be fantastic, but we'll talk about that in a little more detail. And then the last thing is just some of the new approaches for tourism in Spain, and this will reflect on some of the digital credential stuff too. Yeah, it's not the tourist industry, and the Ministry of Tourism is under, it's separate from the Minister of Economy, and yet the Camino is the patrimony. That's a cultural aspect of Spain that's, you know, very unique to Spain. There's only, Santiago is only in Spain. So how do you market that? So you have the economic driver of tourism, you have the cultural driver of doing the Camino, and so now they started talking about, let's not talk tourism in Spain about how many people come to Spain. That can be people that go to the Costa del Sol for a week of vacation in the sun. But, we as pilgrims, especially international, non-European, when we go to Spain, we go for weeks and a month and 40 days. And they said, it's about how long they're there. This is not the right slide. I must have made a mistake. It's about how long they're there. And the one thing that they're talking about that I thought was so cool is, what is the carbon footprint of a tourist? And our footprint, our true footprints, they're not carbon footprints. They, we're not getting into cars and taxis and buses and trains. Once we get on our Camino, we are walking and we're staying there for days and days on end. And most of us will spend a little bit of time afterwards to spend our real money, not our pilgrim money, right? So it's kind of interesting to hear the discussion about, we need the economic development, the people who provide the lodging and the meals and the grocery stores and all of the things that we are wanting and needing as pilgrims. People make their living off of that. So the next part of what they're talking about, and this is a FIX, a Federation of International Camino Associations. They've started a course for tour guides, primarily freelancers, tour guides that have been sanctioned by the cathedral to talk about the Camino. And it's a 60-hour course over a long period of time to teach about the history of the Camino, the values of the Camino, the traditions. So, and these are also not just the tour guides, but the Sofitel and the people that do, Spain tours, and the hosteleros, the people who serve you in a hotel, to try and get some of the, again, I call it the spirit of the Camino, of giving back and listening, and you're still going to be staying in a hotel, but these people will have a little bit different appreciation and understanding of what you as a pilgrim are doing and what the Camino de Santiago is about. And to me, that just sounded like a win-win when you're facing this tension of tourists versus pilgrims. And many of you might remember the old, I think very pejorative term of a turigrino, somebody who did not carry their backpack all the way, or took a taxi, or stayed in hotels, and they didn't do it the real way. We don't really talk about that anymore, because we all recognize that our Camino is our own Camino, and many of us can't do carrying our backpack every day. And sometimes we get blisters and we have to get on a bus and things like that. That doesn't make us less of a pilgrim. But this whole thing of trying to imbue the tourist industry with some real, 60 hours is a lot of training for tour guides and stuff to learn about something that is really unique to Spain. And I think from one of the conferences that I went to, a big driver on this is that the Camino is starting to feel ordinary. And in Spanish, they use the word banalización, the banalization, like the word banal. It just means ordinary. And the Camino is anything but ordinary. But at these conferences, there's just a lot of people talking about, you just can't get on a plane and not know anything about the Camino when you get there. We're not trying to stop it from being an adventure or a new experience or a visit to Spain or anything else. But if you're walking the Camino, they're suggesting that there's no way we can make you do homework, because people said, why don't we make them take a test when they get their credential? Do they know what they're going to be doing? Yeah, and everybody's like, no, that's not what it's about. But how can you enrich your pilgrim experience with a little bit of information? So,
Carmen, can I jump in for a second and ask you a couple questions?
Please. Yes.
So we've had a couple questions. Some folks are asking about access to this course. Is this something that we could take at home, or is this something that folks who are working in Spain take?
It's in Spain for registered tour guides, from what I understand. And there's really a push to get the youth, the younger part of the Spanish tour guides into this so that they can learn about their own patrimony. It's not for the US.
And can you tell us what Jacobeo is?
Oh, the Jacobeo. Basically it's the Galician pilgrim, Office of Responsibility for the Pilgrim in Santiago, the Jacobeo.
Okay, and another question that came in from what you were talking about with the albergues. How far ahead do you suggest for the reservations?
I don't have any idea. I would say most of the time people do it one day in advance, but if you're staying in a hotel, you can do it through booking.com or whatever you're going to do. And as soon as you want to plan, you know.
Okay. And I believe that Martin Menez had a question. He has his hand up.
Hello, Martin. I see your hand.
Sorry, that an operator error.
Oh, no problem. Henry, I see your question.
Yeah, before I had the question, I'm in the process of walking at mid-April, and we had started booking our places to stay, and in a lot of occasions, it was not that easy, even though we were booking way in advance, including booking into Santiago, where we're starting. So yeah, so that's firsthand, because we're leaving in less than 3 months. I don't know what it'll be like later on, but I would assume that it would get the traffic would be even more.
I think you're right, Henry. I'm a pilgrim who has never made a reservation in her life. So, you know, part of it is, what are you willing to do? I've heard some people say they're going to pack a tent that they normally wouldn't do, or you make your reservations well in advance if you know exactly what you're doing and where you're going and what you want to do.
Right. I had raised my hand, not now, but commenting what my experience was doing the Camino.
Okay. And I do stand corrected. The Jacobeo is the Holy Year. The Junta is the organization that's part of the Galician Tourist and Pilgrim Department. So the Jacobeo is the Holy Year. It's I don't know if that's a Galician word for Holy Year. Okay.
That's all I've got right now, Carmen.
Okay. What about this digital credential? What about it? So it came out, it's available, it's on an app, and I think I put that on the chart. If not, I will send that to you, Allison. You can get your 2 daily stamps necessary to prove that you're a pilgrim to Santiago. You get them through QR codes. They're available at different points. And as of last couple weeks ago, there were 400 different places that had agreed and downloaded and digitized the image to do what you can with this digital app. What really strikes me about what they want it to do, and I'm not sure how effective it is because I haven't used it, it's going to have all the information about the different routes that you can take. It's going to, get this, allow for the integration of the data in the Pilgrim Registry if you decide you want to get your Compostela. And maybe we could talk a little bit about that later, what that means, but it's going to be an exact translation. It's going to be a copy of the paper credential. So they're both going to be fully compatible. They'll coexist. So if one of the places you go doesn't have the digital thing, you can go ahead and get it on paper. So, you have to you got to register their username, and it's going to ask you all the same information that they would ask you at the Pilgrims office when you go to get the Compostela. So 2 things that they said in their announcement. Well, obtaining the Compostela will be expedited, okay? Because many of you have stood in lines for hours on end after you get to Santiago, waiting to get your Compostela, and sometimes there are not enough people there to process you very quickly, and sometimes it's pretty perfunctory. You could maybe use a robot, and but we're there. Many of us are there because we really, really want to get that Compostela. So we'll stay and we'll do that. You're still going to have to pay 1.5 euros, your donation. This digital thing has been approved by both the cathedral and the junta. So there's no, oh no, we're not going to take that, and we're not going to take this. And American Pilgrims has been authorized to issue credentials. And again, it's by the cathedral who makes that determination as to who can issue those credentials. I see Mike asking about the credential in Portugal. I don't think so. I don't know, but everything that I've read pertains to Spain right now, primarily the Camino Frances. You're going to get, this is what just kills me about it, but I suppose it's really a good thing that when you are about to arrive in Santiago, of course, they know where you are. You're going to receive a welcome message, along with the possibility of requesting a distance certificate, which is, I walked 800 kilometers. It also allows you to get the last stamp, which speeds up the procedure to obtain the Compostela. They said that about 3 or 4 times in their talking papers, and I don't know. I don't know if many of us want to use it. We'll use it. Who knows? They
Carmen,
say, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Is anybody talking about its use on the Norte?
It's available supposedly at 400 sites, and those are not distinguished. Okay, when in their communiques, one of the things that they talk about, it's a commitment to new technologies on the Jacobin routes, and technology does equate somewhat with security and safety. So for those of us that are not ditching our cell phones when we go on our Camino, it's another tool that we can use. COVID really kind of, remember at the very beginning when we were afraid to touch anything that anybody else had touched, and you're talking about taking their paper credentials and stamping it and handing it back and all this kind of stuff. So they came up with this as a way to heighten security. There's also, separate from that app, another digital advance is that you have a reservation platform for the places to stay in Galicia, only in Galicia. That's not outside of it for the rest of the Camino Frances. And it's called Book Albergue. Let's see. I guess that's really there's information about how you can get it and download the app. When you go ahead and do get the app, you'll see all the little things that they have there for you. So I think that's all about I wanted to talk about in Spain. Are there any specific questions? And any specific questions about any of those things that I just talked about?
I have a question, Carmen. You, I think, spoke at one point, not tonight, but at another time, just about kind of the sustainability of the efforts that they're doing to make sure that the Camino lasts another 1,200 years. Can you speak a little bit to those?
So those are some of the things that they talked about at the Congreso de Federaciones Españolas, and a very international conference, and just recognizing that this wave of humanity is interested in doing pilgrimages. You know, we kind of feel that when we finish these things, we're kind of like ambassadors of peace and love and gratitude and all these great things. So again, the number one worry is the Camino becoming ordinary, and juxtapose that to how do we make it more accessible to people without changing it, right? So there's a big movement from an environmental perspective and from a disability perspective. We've all seen some of the wonderful movies like I'll Push You, and we've seen vision impaired pilgrims. We've seen pilgrims who are hard of hearing. And there's a move to make it accessible, not to accommodate, but to make it accessible through technology. And, you know, having things digitized so that if you're listening, you can walk on the road. You can't see, but it will say, you know, there is not a big rock here, because they're not going to move the rock. They're just going to say, you're coming up to an area where you're going to need some help with your wheelchair or with your whatever it is. So from an accessibility perspective, it was really, really quite exciting. From the sustainability, it's more like sustaining the traditions of the Camino and the values of the Camino, more so than we need more trash cans on the Camino. And of course, we talked about why aren't there enough trash cans on the Camino? Well, because the municipalities have this, and you only get a truck that goes up there once a week, depending on how many people live in your village, and the whole political aspects of how they do that kind of work. They're going to keep on working on that. And there is an association of municipios de federaciones for all of Spain, and they talk about how do we make these things happen better and differently. So let's do the little survey, Allison.
Got it. Can y'all see the poll? I don't feel like y'all can see it. No one has participated. Oh, there we go.
Is anybody answering that?
Yes, I'm going to give it 30 more
Okay.
seconds. Oh, and the question was if you have done sections. Yes, each section that you've done, you can count it as a separate Camino. If that's how you view it, that would be great.
Yeah, you don't have to have arrived in Santiago.
All right, I'm going to give you 12 more seconds. Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to answer if you wanted to. All right, I'm going to end the poll so we can see the results.
Wow.
So how many Caminos have you walked? We've got 58% who have walked between 1 and 3, and then we have 25% who've walked 0. We've got 18 who've walked 3 or more. And what is important to you? By far, the highest one here was the Spirit of the Camino at 9%, and then we had the Credential at 5% and the Compostela at 4%. And then the last question down here is, should albergues accept transported suitcases on the same basis as backpacks? And the answer was 74% yes and 26% no. So Carmen, do you want to speak to any of those?
Well, I do. I'd like to start with the last one first, because I'm shocked at the answer. When I first heard the question posed, I hadn't even thought about it, but it is one of the things that has happened during COVID, that you have a different kind of pilgrim. A lot of them are, Spaniards walking in their own country, and it's pretty easy. And I think maybe from a familiar perspective, you'll have somebody who wants to walk and someone who doesn't, and somebody who can drive a car or do whatever. But one of the things that happened at one of the albergues that I'm in touch with the owners of, they said, should we be accepting suitcases? And I said, well, it's just a different thing than packing a backpack. He says, well, but when you pack a pack, you are intending to carry it some portion of the way. You're not just checking it at the airport and picking it up at baggage claim. At some point, you're going to be responsible for that. He says, I believe, and I've thought about this quite some time, and I'd like to hear some comments on it, that there's so many teachings of Camino, but one of the big teachings is that we can live our life simply. And if we can take a suitcase, we can put a hairdryer in there. We can put in, our evening clothes for more than one day. We don't have to, wear our shower sandals out to dinner, and all the things that we do when we live simply out of our pack for that week or 30 days or however long it is. It truly is for me, one of the primary teachings of walking a pilgrimage and walking the Camino is staying simple. So I'm really surprised at all of your answers and love to hear some comments on that. I'm also really surprised about the Credential, Compostela spirit of the Camino, and I'm gratified, because I think there's a lot of people who really believe that the Compostela is the driver for many of us. And the Compostela is the document that you get when you get to Santiago, when you go to the pilgrim office, and it's sanctioned by the cathedral, and it confirms that you are indeed completed your pilgrimage to Santiago. And the requirement that you have walked at least 100 kilometers is why you have either the digital or the paper credential to prove that you have actually walked those 100 kilometers. It's made up. I mean, there is absolutely no history for it. It was, the requirement when you got to Santiago, I mean, you had completed your penance and you were freed from whatever sins you had committed, and you were forgiven and you had done that. It was not to get a Compostela. And yet a lot of the sustainability issue is you've got this tremendous concentration of people the last 100 kilometers of the Camino Frances to get your Compostela. And it's beautiful. And of course, when you go for the first time, you want to get one. The second time, do you really want to, are you going to go and stand in the line? And it's become, I did not do my first Camino until 2014, so I am not a veteran like many of you on this phone call who went in the late 90s or early 2000s. I'm not. I can't say, how terrible it is now with all the people and stuff, because I'm not that 2014. But I think there's some things have changed with the other word that they use is the massification of the Camino, which of course we haven't had that problem for the last 2 years. So who is it that's going to go back, and why are you going to go back? Kind of doing full circle to the spirit of the Camino and what we're trying to, why we're going. Why are we going on these journeys? So 58% of you, and you still want to keep talking about the Camino. How many of you are going back like this summer? I know we can't ask that question, but just kind of put your little hand thing on there. And I'm done with this poll, Allison. Wow. Well, I'm sure there's some chatter in the chat room about where everybody's going. And I think, do I have one more chart? I don't think I have any more charts. I think I'm really kind of done with sharing what I actually know. So I'd love to open it up to anything that's, let me see if there's some affinity in any of these questions in the chat room. And thank you, Barbara, for your, this was just a real simple survey. I was just trying to get a feel for, who is on the call, and it's not a scientific survey monkey type of thing, because I was just trying to get a feel for who's here. Michelle Lunican, yes, the CPAPs and stuff like that, that would be a very difficult Camino to do with all of that kind of stuff. So I do think there are cases when you might want to do that, but I think in general, I just pose that as, some of the lessons that we learn from, and that's traditional pilgrimage, is that there is an element of suffering, whether it's blisters or heartache or self-introspection that goes along with walking a Camino. And suitcase just got the wrong image for me, but I agree with what you say here. I think your cafes, Susan, most of them are going to be open, if they opened at all, and there'll be some distancing. When I was in Madrid, people were very, 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 nobody ever walked in without a mask. The social distancing was a little bit less rigorous. I think part of that's the culture, and I think that's part of what I think many of us may miss when we're there. I don't think we're going to be hugging each other in albergues. I don't think your hospitalero is going to be, hugging you when you get there. He or she may listen to you from a 6-foot distance with the mask on. And we've been told, and I think we all have learned that, with our masks, we've learned to smile with our eyes and to show that welcoming and love through other means than physical touching. And so that's going to be a really big change. The one thing I forgot to talk about, it does not sound like there will be the traditional communal meals. Not planned anyway. You as pilgrims may get together and do like you do at some of the albergues and say, oh, let's have dinner together and make your meals together. But as far as those pretty famous ones like in Grado and other places, it's not clear that those traditions are going to be available this summer. But time will tell. I mean, everything depends on what happens tomorrow, right? And what day you get there and what's going on with the surge and if there's a new variant and all that other kind of stuff. So let's see, am I missing questions?
I'm trying to catch some of the questions, Carmen.
Okay. I haven't heard the latest on Rabanal, and I know that they used to be very, very rigorous in their rules. I think a lot of people are having to open up their new eyes and hearts to a new situation. Let's see. Wise Pilgrims, good. Yes, public albergues and donativos are accepting reservations because of the limitation on the capacity. They're just doing it that way. Let's see. People talking about telephones. Jebanessa's never heard of that. Where is the Suzanne Osterloni? Where is the Jebanesses?
It's from Geneva to Le Puy.
Ooh, nice.
Anybody doing it?
I met one person who did that when I was volunteering in Spain, and they had started in Geneva and gone that route. And then they went, I think, in southern, they took Le Puy, and then they went down to Arles, and then they took the southern route and came up. It was interesting. It was like a 2,000 kilometers or something. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Hi, Peter.
The routes from Geneva to Le Puy are designer routes because the historic route has been lost. And there are 3 or 4 different routes. And I took one that was the southernmost route, and it went through the hills, through some old monasteries, and it was fantastic. And I was the only, in fact, I was the first American that many people met on that section of the Camino. So it's a wonderful route. If you must be able to speak French.
Oui.
Okay, d'accord.
D'accord. Ah, mais oui.
I'm just wondering if, because you're staying in a lot of people's homes, if anybody's did it last year, if that's going to be happening.
I don't know.
Yeah.
This is Sharon Fields. I did the Le Puy this past fall, and we just did from Le Puy to Pont, and it was wonderful. We felt very safe. We were in many places that we stayed. We were the first Americans in 2 years. It was most of the time we were the only guests in the homes. So I don't expect that to continue, but you know, it was truly fabulous. It was a little lonely out on the walk, but it was quite nice. Everyone, even in Paris, I felt welcomed. And I had not had a real good experience. They were so happy to see us. So yeah, we're planning our fall trip to include a little more of the week before we head into Spain this year. So bon voyage.
If you would allow me, I would like to make a brief comment about the discussion of the spirit of the Camino. I read this book by Nancy Louise Fry, On and Off the Road to Santiago. She did her PhD work, I think, along the Camino. Her book, or let's say the public version, came out in 1998. And she has an Appendix B, which she calls the 20th Century Reanimation of the Camino. And it was striking to me to read what she talks about, and Carmen kind of touched on that, the mass, let's call it tourism, the mass tourism that was about to start. I think it was in the 70s or 80s when they opened the Camino for cars. And then she talked about aspirations or projects that she called would turn the Camino into something like Disneyland. So after reading this, I have come to the conclusion it's a miracle that the Camino today, or let's say in the last 20 years or so, still operates the way it did 200, 300, 400 years ago, that we still walk the whole way, that we still stay in albergos all together, that we still are treated, welcomed as pilgrims, and I hope we behave as pilgrims. I understand that we are in the middle of a digital revolution, but I am really focusing on the thought, how can we keep the Camino the way it is, it operates, and keep that tradition? And there are certain things that are, in my mind, key to it. Yeah, making it available for, let's say, handicapped people is a challenge, but I would not hope that that is the the reason or the argument or the strategy that will break that tradition. I think it's a miracle, and we need to hold on to that miracle. In the 21st century, still walking like pilgrims did 400 years ago.
Dirk, thank you for those comments. And I would say on the accessibility issue, they made it very clear that they're not talking about making public accommodations. It's not, if you want to go on the Camino, they're helping you do so. It's not that you're going to get a guide who's going to take you. It's not that. They're trying to keep the traditional aspects of the Camino alive, which is, basically you set off by yourself for a purpose, whether it was mandated by your priest or you made a vow to somebody. I mean, when we take off on these experiences, and it's been going on for over 1,000 years, actually, it's why? And Santiago isn't obviously the only place that you can make a pilgrimage, but we're choosing to go to Spain and to do that. And some of these organizations that I referred to, FIX in particular, has been relatively active in combating some of the stuff that seems to happen without a lot of thought. For example, they've been talking about putting the wind turbines next to Cruz de Ferro on the Camino Frances. And the group is saying, you're talking about national patrimony. I mean, this is the culture and heritage. And the Cruz de Ferro wasn't there 1,000 years ago. But nothing is the same day after day after day, year after year. Things change. I mean, life changes, but the Camino endures because you have people going on the Camino in search of themselves. I think that's why we go, for the most part. I was going to do a thing. Why do you go? I want to be outside. I want to be with friends. I want to have an adventure. But when you're done with your Camino, you knew there was something there that called you and took you there, right? So I'm not trying to tout anybody's book, but I do think one of the better books, and it's not about the Camino de Santiago, it's about the art of pilgrimage. And it's by a guy named Phil Cuisinot, and it's called The Seeker's Guide to Making Travel Sacred. And he just kind of, we're all in this together. We're inclusive. There's not a difference between a tourist and a pilgrim. It's called The Art of Pilgrimage. That's the title. And the last name is Cuisinot.
Carmen, while you do that, I'm sorry. I think there was a question in the chat and I have lost where the question went because we've had such great conversations in the chat this evening. I think that somebody was asking about the Spanish travel app. And if you just Google Spanish travel app, it will pop up for you and you answer some questions and you download it and you can put your documents on there is my understanding. So
can you see this? You have to do it in Spanish at the App Store. It's for iOS and for Android, and it's called Credential del Peregrino. And it's with a C.
I think the dog wants out.
I thank you. I saw that.
well, that might be a good sign for us pilgrims. If we have one more question, I'm sure that Carmen would love to answer it. We probably have time for one more.
It looks like no. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your, yes, Isabel, that's it, for sharing your questions, for listening to me, to being with each other. And I hope you'll connect. I hope you'll connect through your chapters. I hope you'll connect through people that you saw in the chat room. And join us next time for our next exciting subject, which is, who knows?
Carmen?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot, Carmen. Our next speaker, thank you, is Alexander John Shaya is speaking.
He's
And
great.
He's speaking from Spain, so that event is actually going to be on a Saturday to accommodate for the time difference for us. But a huge thank you to Carmen for preparing for and having such great information to share with us tonight. I did put in the chat, there is an email address that you can reach us at, which is board@americanpilgrims.org. If you have questions that you didn't want to ask in the chat or you didn't want to ask out loud, I completely understand that, because there just may be stuff you don't want to do. So please feel free to get with us on that. And it looks like Paula wants to finish us out.
Yes, thank you very much, Allison. I just wanted to point out that there is another new board member on this Zoom call, and that's Joe Curo from Boston. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Joe. Hi, Linda
Hey, everyone.
Fitz. Hello, Helen Wharton.